Alright, boys and girls, it is modification time here, working on the Volvo A60H and getting ready to install attempt to install some lift servos onto our bed. Now, we've got to do a few things to this before we even attempt to do this. I don't think anybody has attempted to modify a Tamiya Volvo A60H into an actual working tipper truck that actually raises and lowers and can dump material out of the back without a problem. I say that with dumping material out of the back without a problem because we're going to have to modify the hinges on the back of this so it can actually hinge up a little bit further. Right now, as it sits, the way this thing hinges, it won't go up far enough to dump material out of the back. We've got a little bit of a flat spot down here, so it's not going to slide out very well from inside here if we're going to dump stuff out. Not very well at all. So we need to modify this a little bit more so that we can get some more tip out of this thing. Basically what's happening is our rear hinge right here is hitting our shock tower and the back half of our shock. So we need to remove some material in here to get this to fall backwards a little bit further and get this a little bit more vertical in order to reliably dump material out of here. Now I've got the bed stays removed, so I'm just kind of tweaking this off to the side and pulling that out of the way. And this is how I measured my line. I basically moved the bed to the opposite side over here and just kind of lining this up with our hinge like so, excuse the camera angles, and holding it like that and guesstimating how much material we have to take out in order to get this bed to stand up somewhat vertical. And I got it kind of marked a little bit. Excuse the camera. I apologize for that, boys and girls. I can't hold the camera and hit focus at the same time. But the way we got this thing kind of sitting right now, we got it kind of marked where we need to remove the material. And did that on both sides. Basically just marked on one side just like that and spun the truck around and did the same thing on the other side and marked it. And we're going to take this thing out to the grinder and remove some more plastic so we can get this thing to stand up a little bit. Basically, let's see if I can find a spot here to show you where I marked this, if I can hold this upright. Here's where we're hitting right here. Oh, excuse me. This is where we're hitting right here on our plastic. So we need to bring this up a little bit further to get this to tip back farther. Basically just drawing a straight line off the end of this right here and coming backwards a little bit. I don't want to get too close to this hinge. I want to leave a little bit of plastic between our cut mark and our hinge just for some strength and rigidity, because we're putting all the stresses being put on this when we raise and lower the bed. All the stress is right here on the hinge. So we need to leave as much material back here as we can, but at the same time, we have to remove material in order to get this to tip back farther. But I want to leave as much material as I can between this ring and that cut point. So drawing a line kind of like this on up here. Excuse the camera, man. That looks terrible. I apologize. We're going to leave a small gap of material right here. So I drew a straight line up and then drawing a line kind of across to here. Now this isn't a straight line to this, and it's not a straight line to this. We're kind of making a straight line to our across our shock tower back here. So we're trying to make a straight line across here. So when we tilt it up, it's going to wrap around this whole area back here, and this whole area will recess back into that notch that we're cutting out. So we need to be able to go to the screw head and all the way back to this other side. So we're basically drawing our straight line across here. Whatever that ends up being is whatever it ends up being right here. So after holding the bed up and eyeballing it and basically just taking the pencil and going and making a line across it with my eyeball is how I did that straight line. But once again, we need to leave material between here and here just to give this a little bit more strength and rigidity. And we might have to put a custom bracket in here to stiffen this up as well, to give it just a little bit more oomph to keep that held together securely. So we're going to notch this out a little bit on either side so we can get a little bit more lift out of it. And I'm basically just going to remove our mounts right off the bed itself, removing those Phillips screws, taking the mounts off, and going out to our other garage and using a bench grinder, like a 6-inch grinding wheel or a cutoff wheel or a die grinder or something to remove that material. One way or another, that material's coming out of there. After that, the next step is going to be trying to figure out where to mount our screw servo to raise and lower this. The best place is right here, or in this general area. Now, we're going to have to do some serious modifications to mount this. These little posts right here, they're not going to work. And plus, it's going to bring our servo out too far. And it's going to be too close to our wheels right here. So there's not enough room to put it right here. And then the travel doesn't work out either, up and down, with full extension and full collapse of our cylinder for raising and lowering our bed. Meaning, if we get our right size cylinder in here like this, we can't collapse it down far enough to get the bed to sit flat on the chassis. And we either can or cannot raise it up far enough to get past our tip point. I think we can raise it up more than far enough to get past our tip point, but we're not going to be able to collapse it far enough down to lower the bed all the way. These lift cylinders are for a 1550 excavator. Basically like a 1550 mod excavator. When you go out and buy these cylinders online, you get 3 of them. One extremely short one, one medium length, and one slightly longer. Much like these over here on my 1550. So worm gear screw servos. And trying to find the right length is the hard part. It needs to be able to get full extension as well as being able to collapse all the way. Mounting position is another hard part. Where to mount it to on the bed itself. Now we can use our stock mount point right here, but it's a little bit far on the outside, meaning that this is sitting inside too far and this is sitting outside too far. So our piston is going to be sitting in here crooked like that when we go to mount it up. Instead of being straight on from mount point to mount point, it's going to be way off like this off to the side. And if you have 2 of them, that means it's going to be pushing out kind of like a V like this. It's going to be pushing up like that and then retracting back kind of on an angle, which isn't necessarily good. So we might have to make a mount further to the inside of this mount here for our piston to attach to. Possibly using these 2 points right here and something else to bring it in further to the inside of the bed. Or possibly moving it further back on the bed, or possibly moving it further forward on the bed. That's another thing, is when we're lifting this up, it puts a lot of stress on this point, which directly transfers back to this hinge right here. So we're pushing this way on this, which is putting direct pressure onto that hinge. It's a lot of pressure to lift the bed from right there, the fulcrum and the whole angle and everything, and leverage. It'd be a lot easier to lift the bed from further back. It would be a lot easier on the hinge, like if we had a piston right here at the front that was staged, because you need a stage piston, something that could raise up and raise up and raise up and raise up to fit into that gap, to raise it up all the way and bring it all the way back down would be the easiest way to go about it, but we can't fit one in here. These guys aren't long enough to bring it all the way up and are too long to bring it all the way back down. That's where you need one that like a hydraulic piston that's staged with a 4 or 5 series lift on it, so it goes up so far and then goes with another piston, then goes up so far and goes up to another piston, that they keep stacking up and then they collapse back down. That's where it needs to lift from the front. But we're not going to be able to do that, so trying to do it like this, it's going to be touch and go, trying to find the correct mounting position that we're not too far back and not too far forward. So right now this servo looks like it's too long for here, which means we'd have to move the mount back even further if we were to try to use this, which would put our leverage point, hinge point, back even further, which puts even more stress back here, if that makes any sense. And a shorter one, if we use the shortest one to go in here, we'll go in here just fine, right? But it won't lift up high enough because it's too short. So it'll only go up so far. It'll come back down all the way, but it'll only go up so far. So we'll be kind of SOL on that, which is crap out of luck. So we need to find the right length, and we need to find the right mounting position, as well as the right mounting position for here. As far as mounting it to the chassis, we're going to have to make a custom mount with aluminum. We'll probably have to cut a notch out of our chassis right here, and then we'll have to attach that to the chassis in some way, shape, or form that is secure. So we'll have to probably screw it right into the gearbox, and that's another sketchy thing. Trying to find a spot in the gearbox that you can run a screw in without hitting one of the many sets of gears that run through here. So that's another tricky point, how to attach it. Once again, I think I'm the first person to do this, so bear with me on it. Worst case scenario, last ditch effort to get this to raise and lower, we might have to switch to an entirely different lift system, possibly robbing the lift system off of my legendary tipper truck, or making one with a heavy-duty servo to get this to raise and lower. And that'd be using, let's say, a super strong servo, 1,000 inch ounce servo at least, to put in here. and a large servo horn, and then a rod going to the servo to raise and lower the bed. So essentially, if you picture this as your large servo horn, and this is a rod being attached to the servo horn, when the servo horn is in the bottom position, your bed would be down. And when you raised it up to the upper position, the bed would be up. So you can imagine, bed goes up, bed comes down, bed goes up, bed comes down. That's how it works on these trucks. They've got a little linkage that goes to a dual servo horned electric gear driven gearbox in there. And when you raise it up, the rods go up and it pushes the bed up, and when you bring it down, it goes back down. And it's just traveling on a wheel, so it's going up and coming back down, going back up and coming back down, like a crankshaft on a single cylinder engine pushing a piston. It's going up and down. So that's how it works. So worst case scenario, we might have to do the same thing on this. Just use a servo, strong servo, gigantic servo horn. Probably hard to find one in metal. This one's plastic. This is just for instances. And mounted in here, something like this. We have to make our own custom mounts for it. And once again, in the down position, have it mounted down to here and up to here. The down position would be down, and when we crank this up, it would, raise this back up. And that might be the best way to do it. And use our faux cylinders back in here. So putting our stock plastic cylinders back in place and having them mocked up so it looks like it's got cylinders. But our actual lift point would be back here with this. That might be our only other option for raising and lowering this bed, is something like that, as far as things go. Because this right here, once again, this might be too long or too short. And mounting it is going to be a real pain in the butt. We're going to have to, once again, cut a chunk out of here and make a custom plate to mount these up to. Two of these, one on either side, for mounting. And so that's going to be a whole nother fabrication issue, which is really not too bad. The only real problem with this is that the servo's in the way. Really, if this servo wasn't sitting here, we could use these pistons without a problem. Mounted to this position right here, if that servo wasn't sitting right there. It's just a little bit in the way, by about half inch or so. So the servo is about a half inch too long. It's getting in the way of using this. We can mount this up on the other side like that, on the passenger side. It'd be a lot easier to get this hooked up in here and sitting in the right position. Mounted back here because we don't have to worry about that servo. So it'd be a lot easier to hit that point and come back here and get it in the right spot. But that servo being where it's at is in a bad spot, so we'd have to move it forward a little bit right here, which pushes that too far forward past our mount point, which once again is not a big deal. I can make a custom bracket to go to this that extends backwards a little bit further. So attach it here and have a finger that comes off back here that this gets attached to. So it would be attached to here but connected back here. But still, that's a lot of pressure on our hinge point down here for raising and lowering this. And we're taking material off of this back here. So we're going to be making it weaker. It's going to be putting a lot of stress right on this back edge right here, because it's going to push this backwards, bam, like that. And then it's going to try to push it up, which is putting a lot of stress on that hinge. Once again, can't stress that enough, the stress that we're putting on that. So once again, this is a do-at-your-own risk kind of build. From top to bottom, and hopefully we can get to work. Gearing, once again, we can't do much about the gearing on this truck, and that sucks because excuse my language, but it's terrible that we can't lower this down any further than what it is. We only have 2 gear choices on this, a 19 and I want to say a 22 or a 23. Don't quote me on it. It's stamped on the other side of the chassis, so it'd probably be pretty easy for me just to spin this around and look at it, but we can only use 2 gears on this thing, and we need to be able to drop it down to like a 10 tooth, and it's just impossible. You can't do it, because the pinion gear on this fits in between 2 counter gears like that, and it gets adjusted up and down this way. So 1 gear sits in just like this, and the other gear sits in a little bit further down, and it makes connection. But if you go too small, then it's like a hot dog in the hallway, and it's not going to touch either one of the gears. So you can't make it work because we're driving 2 counter gears off of 1 pinion gear. So that pinion gear has to be able to make contact with both gears at the same time in order to make this thing move. So we're limited on our gearing. Only other way to get this thing geared down, once again, I said this in a previous video, is either a lower turn motor or a higher turn motor, such as an 85 turn, or a larger class motor, such as a 550 or a 750, if we could fit it in here, or a brushless motor, and going to a lower kV, like a 1200 kV or 1300 kV or something that's got a lot of low end torque because we're stuck with our gear. We're stuck with that gear, so we're going to have to get our low end power out of the motor itself. Or smaller tires. Smaller tires we put on it, the lower our gearing will be. But we can only go so small before it doesn't look right proportionally, or we're dragging our belly on the ground, which defeats the purpose of having suspension and six-wheel drive if you're dragging your belly across the ground. That's what these trucks do. They drag their bellies, and they've got no suspension, so they get stuck everywhere. And plastic tires, so they get stuck everywhere. Which, once again, is why we need a vehicle like this with six-wheel drive and independent suspension. Limited suspension. It's not the best, but it's better than nothing. And it's got rubber tires, you know. So, yeah, we're a lot better off. All right, so let's get started on this here. I'm going to go out to the garage, remove our mounts, do some grinding, see if we can get a little bit more lift out of this, and then we'll see what happens with our lift cylinders. Once again, this is going to be hit and miss. I'm going to be bouncing back and forth. A lot of the stuff's not going to be seen on camera. You'll see the end result. You'll see the before, the after, me talking about it, and the end result, and I'll tell you how I got there. But a lot of the going in between and me going out to the garage and actually grinding on it, I'm not going to put that in here because it's going to take up too much time. But I'll show you what it looks like right now and tell you how I got the material out after the fact. But as far as doing it, you guys and gals are on your own. Just got back in from the garage. Had to use a bench grinder, or didn't have to, but used a bench grinder to remove the plastic from here, which is just basically a 6-inch grinding wheel on a 1/2 horsepower motor mounted on a workbench. Grinding wheel is a little bit too fat to fit in here straight on, so it came in here on an edge, on an angle, and just kind of ground in slowly, and then worked the grinding wheel across on the nose of it, removing material, and flipped the part around, did the same thing on the other side, come back this way. It's not quite even just because I was using the edge of the wheel to remove all the plastic through here, but it's not too bad. And we're pretty close side to side when we compare these two parts next to each other. After doing the grind on it. Sorry about that. But they're pretty close as far as things go. And our total depth cutting back in and evenness from top to bottom. Not bad for pencil sketch on the side of the truck. Because basically all we did was just sketched it out roughly on either side. It looks pretty good from right here as we're looking at it. We're definitely getting a lot more clearance over top of this shock tower. So right now it's just a matter of putting the stuff back on the bed real quick, putting the mounts back on there, mock fitting it, seeing how it tilts back with the bed attached. If we have to remove more, then we'll take it back apart and do so. But that's what we've got to do next, is put this thing on there and see what she looks like and go from there. Alright, so let's get her mocked up and take a peek at that. Alright, we got the bed back on the truck. Notches put in place. We're not totally mounted up because we don't have our little bed stays in here to keep our bed nice and center and locked in place. But leaning it back right now, it's sitting back on its own. Had a little bit of movement in there from the lack of the bed stays, but it's sitting back on its own. Pretty strong angle. Looking flat on here at the base of the bed. And then our little flat spot before that was pretty much flat on the inside of the bed is got a pretty good strong angle on that right now. So I don't think we're going to have a problem with dumping material out of here. As long as we can get it back that far, the material should slide out. Previously, we were only coming back to about here. And we see this little angle spot on the inside right here is almost flat at that point in time. So we'd be asking a lot out of it to get material out from there. But after removing the material, it's going back quite a bit further. Stays back on its own, so I think we'll be all set. Now, once again, not very secure the way this is mounted up to the bed. So in the future, we might have a problem. We might end up breaking these mounts off and have to come up with a whole new design, or possibly come in here and try to support these and make some brackets on the inside, some gussets, to try to make this a little bit stronger. Where the mounts mount onto the bed. Here and here, and here and here. Asking a lot of these points for dumping a load of material. There's not much strength there, really. So we might need some metal brackets or something to kind of tie this stuff together. You know, something going from here to here to here, triangulate it all with a metal bracket of some sort. Might have to make our own new holes in different brackets all together. So we'll see how long she lasts. As long as we're somewhat nice to it, I think we'll be okay. Meaning don't overload it too much, you know. Just put in as much as you can get in there and it should be sufficient. We don't need to be putting in concrete blocks and loading it down with 50 or 60 pounds of material and trying to dump that out. That'd be ridiculous. So as long as we're just staying within our limits on how much we can hold in here, I think we'll be all right. Keeping in mind that we don't overdrive it and send it too far with our worm gear screw servos. We might need to put some limiters on there. So if we send it too far, that could definitely break it for sure. And there we go. There's first step is done. Got our material ground away. Doesn't look too bad all in all. Really hardly even noticeable that we even took that material out of there. It almost looks stock at this point in time, so whatever. And it's definitely dumping better, that's for sure. Alright, next step. Trying to fab up our cylinders here and get a good mounting position for these things. On either side. So once again, we're probably going to have to remove some material through here. Don't start cutting on your vehicle yet until you see what the end result is on this one before you start cutting on yours, because I might change my mind midway through here. But tentatively, right now, I think I need to cut out a block out of here, basically right down here and across and up. Basically, this whole chunk right here. Just cut this out. Pop that out. Same thing on the other side. Making sure to leave enough material that we have good strength for our steering servo mount right there. We don't want to mess with that. We just need to remove some material so we can put a plate in here to mount these guys up to. Something that's solid. And not made of plastic like this. That's going to break. Alright, so next step is moving on to this stuff and seeing what we can do for making a lift system. Once again, if I can't get this to work here, then we're probably going to have to go on to a servo style setup like this, with that centrally mounted right there, and having a link going to the bottom of the bed, from here to the bottom of the bed. So when we cycle this up, it'll be lifting this up. When we raise it, lower it back down, it'll be lowering it back down. It's a pretty short link on there. It's only a couple inches of travel, really. So if we move this up hypothetically, the distance of that wheel, let's say the distance of here, hypothetical distance, raise it up. It might not be high enough, like that, to get that to dump all the way out. Definitely not going to be pushed up to here, that's for sure. So that probably won't work. Not like that anyways. Not without having a larger diameter wheel on here, which would mean that you'd have to have this mounted slightly lower to gain the clearance with a longer push rod on it. So this might be out of the question. We might be just stuck with the screw servo idea here, which isn't bad. It's okay. As long as we can get our length right, we'll be alright. Alright, we'll continue here in a few minutes. Alright, a couple hours later, checking out the tipper truck, I think I've got something worked out that pretty much all of us can do. All you boys and girls out there who are somewhat handy should be able to do this, maybe, possibly, without too much fabrication. So far, the biggest fabrication that we've had to do was remove material from our mounts back here. That was the biggest thing that we've had to do so far, as fabricating. My next thought was that we were going to have to cut a big chunk of plastic out right through here, a U-shaped chunk out of this battery tray, and same thing on the other side. That way we can mount in a piece of aluminum C-channel to hold our servos in place, essentially, and mount similar to these servo mounts here, but use this piece of C-channel instead, so it's going to be nice and strong, and attach it to the chassis, which was going to be a lot of fabricating, as well as finding another mounting position for the opposite end of that screw servo to attach to the bed. because we can't use this mount right here. It's just too far out on the chassis. This point right here, compared to this point right here, it's coming out. The chassis is pretty narrow. So having that mount right here, and that outer point right there, you can see it's kind of bent out quite a bit. And that's pretty hard on those screw servos, trying to push out on an angle for a long distance. The angle just gets greater and greater. You need to be kind of going straight on with things. So coming up with another mounting position to where it was going to have to be attached to is another thing. Using the servo that was proper for the spot that I was trying to go for, which is basically this hole right here. Mock-up hole being this hole right here. This is nowhere near strong enough to hold on to one of those servos. The middle size or the mid-size servo out of the three was the one that I was going to go with. We had our smaller one, our mid-size one, and the longest one. So I've got two mid-size ones that I had lined up initially to do this. And we would have one point right here going to the center of the servo, right down here. Would be our mounting position for that. And then the other position was going to have to go somewhere in here, right where that dot is. So I'd have to make a custom plate to go across the bottom of this box with a tang on it that we can mount the other end of the piston to, so it's got somewhere to push on. So that's where that was going to have to sit at. And then after fiddling around and messing around, I found a better spot with a smaller servo. I was able to find a spot using the smallest servo, and it'll go the full distance. We just had to move it further back. So using this upper shock mount right here, which is actually a pretty solid mount, this mount right here, to attach it to for an attachment point. The shock's being mounted in two places, right here and right here. And it's pretty solid, that gap in the plastic. It has a pretty good bite on it. So I removed that top shock screw right there, and I've got one mocked up, a cylinder mocked up on the other side that we can barely see over there. And we've got a super long M3 going through, holding it in place into this position here. It's going to require some bushings, some plastic bushings to go in between to take up the gap, which is fine. We've got a whole ton of plastic bushings that came with this truck. We put a set of fast Eddie's bearings in this. We'll put a link in the video for the fast Eddie's bearings. But we put a fast Eddie's bearing kit in it when I assembled it initially. So I've got all the stock bushings that are left over on this thing. So we can use those for spacers if we need to take up some gap in here. So we're going to have to add a couple spacers in between our servo and this mount, and a couple more into the next mount. Now the next mounting position is right here on the top half of this bed mount, right there, the upper right corner of this bed mount. So the screw is pushing on the bed, this part right here, this this yellow plastic, as well as that screw right there. So as we're pushing our mount backwards here, it's applying pressure to this as well as to that to hold it straight. Now right now I've got one long M3 attaching the other end of the cylinder into this point right here on the opposite side. But that's not going to work. It's fine for pushing it up, but when it comes to retracting it, that screw is able to bend backwards in here, essentially going from this position here, which is fine for going up because it's got plenty of stopping power to push this thing up, but when you retract it back, it does this because of where it's sitting. So what needs to happen here is that either A, I need to move it to a different location on here, something a little bit more central and flat, which is probably not going to be as strong. I think this is the strongest point right here, and probably the best fulcrum angle for pushing and pulling, raising and lowering the bed, essentially. So I think this is the best angle to have. Ultimately, we're going to need a long threaded rod about this long, an M3 about that long. So probably going to have to go to the hardware store. That way we can run that right through this from one side to the other and put a jam nut down on either side to lock that in place so it can't go anywhere, and have a little bit of thread sticking out on either side that we can hook our cylinders onto and run another nut through, nut down on the back edge to hold those in place. And at that point in time, if we have a long thread rod going through here connecting these 2 points together, it's not going to be able to rock backwards like that anymore. It'll be just a straight solid push up and down, and it should be good. So I've got this mocked up right now with a one cylinder over on the passenger side of the truck so we can see what it looks like and at least have an idea on everything here. So I've got our center tire removed over here off the center axle. Once again, I've got this hooked up right here with a long M3 going through that back half of that mount. And another long M3 right here going into our shock mount up here, that upper shock mount. This right here was my initial idea, was to put one back here and pencil mark where it was going to have to be drilled, or have another mount custom made, a plate to go there. But we're not going to do that. Alright, let's get this baby plugged in and we'll see what she looks like right now. Alright, so we got her plugged in. I'm running a RC full drive wired, or no, wireless winch controller. I always say wired, wireless, because we've got a remote for a key fob. Now I chose to get the key fob that has a little bit better range on it. There's two different wireless remotes you can get. One's the old style, and the new style has an on-off switch for it. I kind of like the old style better, to be honest with you, boys and girls, because there is no on-off switch for it. And that is just one thing that can fail, is that on-off switch. The old ones, on and off is pushing the buttons. As soon as you start pushing it, it's toggling it. So this one actually has a little power light that's lit up right now. You can't tell, but it is lit up. This is down and this is up on our switch here. So if we push our button, this baby should raise up. Being careful that I don't overextend it. I just let off and it kind of settled into place. So once again, I don't really think that we're going to need a limiter switch on this per se, because it's all kind of controlled in our hands, and I think we can do this pretty easy without a limiter switch, without getting too carried away. So there's all the way up. That's all the way down. Doesn't look too terrible where it's sitting at right there. I think once we have our tire in place and everything else, it'll probably look somewhat natural. Let's put a tire on it and see what it looks like. And there's with our center axle tire on there. It doesn't look too bad. I think that looks somewhat natural. No, it's not a cylinder coming off of there, and no, we can't put our stock cylinder back on there because the bed raises up farther than that cylinder can travel. That stock cylinder could only travel about that far previously. And now we're going much further. So I think we're going to be okay right there, boys and girls, with everything. We just need that long threaded rod to go from one point here to the other to keep this screw from walking backwards and walking around on us. Otherwise, I think that is a pretty solid lifting position and raising position, all things considered, once we get our other one hooked up on the other side. Alright, so I need to go to the hardware store. Right now it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to have to go to the hardware store tomorrow and get a threaded rod to go through here. And we'll pick up our project there and continue our deal with getting the other servo hooked up on the other side and try to get this all tied in together. Day 2, and a lot has transpired. Not only with our truck, but also with my phone situation here, what we're recording with. Got sidetracked and never got a chance to go to the hardware store to try to find that M3 screw 5 inches long to get to go through here. So trying to come up with a different way, and also hindsight's 2020. Would like to be able to get this accomplished using all the parts that everything comes with, essentially. So all the parts that come with the Volvo A60H, using extra parts to come with this to get this done, as well as parts to come with our screw servos, such as the hardware, the screws themselves, which are pretty darn long. Alright, so trying to get all this accomplished with all this stuff. You end up buying, instead of these servos, you're going to get screws with them too, so boom, there's the hardware for that. Other things that we need are some spacers to go in between our servo and our shock tower down over here. Because if we get too close to this, we're going to be hitting our shock down there. We only have so much room with the suspension before we start coming into contact with that shock or the bottom of that servo. Our one upper control arm here is hitting the servo upon almost full compression, not quite. It will push up on that just a little bit before this bottoms out. These do bottom out relatively fast, our A-arms here. The shock doesn't fully compress before this bottoms out. It's bottomed out right there. So there really isn't all that much movement on it. regardless of all that nonsense, trying to get this sitting in the right position. So this is an 8mm spacer that I have on here, which is just about perfect to keep our servo off of that shock over there, and also gives us good clearance between the edge of the tire and the screw on the side. So the tire is not going to hit the screw when we're driving. So win-win. I'd like to get this even closer. I'd like to have the servo right flush up against this plastic over here. I mean, ideally, if we could run this thing off of two 18650 batteries, I'd like to cut this chunk out right here and this chunk out right here, put a block of wood in right here, screw the block of wood in, just run a couple screws through the plastic and into the wood that locks it in place from either side in multiple locations, and then take our servo and mount it right here on the side of this and screw it right into that block of wood on either side, and it wouldn't be going anywhere. But we'd have to have a really, really small battery, and I don't think two 18650s are going to push this big 540 along with a load of material in the back of this vehicle. So can't mess with that. Using our stock spacers that come with the servos, it's sitting out just a little bit too wide. It's right around 10mm right here. It's giving us more clearance past the shock body down there, but it hangs out quite a bit, and we don't have all our screw head going into here. So I'd like to be able to get a little bit more thread sticking into this mount on the side, so we're getting a bit better bite on that, and getting our servo a little bit closer so we're don't have as much leverage hanging off the edge down here. Now the next thing is tackling this spot down here. I don't think we necessarily need a threaded rod to go from end to end. All we really need is something to go in between these 2 points to screw into, such as a dowel rod. If we had a dowel rod in here, wooden dowel rod, we could screw into that, and that would essentially link these 2 halves together, such as this dowel rod right here, which is a 5/8 dowel rod. Now I've got a few other chunks of wood that are sitting here that we could use as well to try to put that in place. The best thing would be to try to step it so it sits flush on our plastic mounts down here, and then steps up over top of our mounting post right there that this can screw into, and then sandwich that all together as one solid unit, and it would be much stronger across the board. Whether we use a piece of wood like this, or a piece like this, or something a little bit heavier such as this, or wider, and notch it all out and kind of get that fit in there. Now using kit pieces, we've actually got something that might work right here. Leftover parts from the truck, and we've got a bunch of these. This is actually a body mount slash ESC kind of mounting post thing, and we've got a bunch of these. There's one here in my hand, and I say that now, but there is a few in this kit. There's another one right here that we've got. We've got a bunch of leftover parts here in this kit. Excuse the box being so far away. My camera's plugged in, and we're stretching to the maximum. So there's another one right down there as well. So we've got a few of these sitting in here, and I think we could use one of these across the back of here. I've got this screw backed out quite a ways, as you can see. We're going to be basically sitting flush with that screw there, or that servo. So we could put this in here just like this, and thread these screws in on either side, and then put a piece of double-sided tape across the back of this, and stick that to the bottom of the bed. And you never really know it was there. And that'd be using kit pieces to get everything done. So I think we're going to try that, just to see if we can get it to work, using kit pieces once again, so everybody and their brother can do this without doing any major modifications. Next thing, once again, is this spacer down here. That's an 8mm spacer. I'm using this is an RC 4-wheel drive screw kit, or spacer kit, hardware kit. And it came with a whole ton of spacers and grub screws and relatively long metric screws. I think we're going to end up switching over these here in a minute. But I want to be able to do this with all the stuff that comes included with this, along with these servos. That way everybody that's watching can basically do this with what you have. Alright, so trying to come up with an 8mm spacer essentially to go in here. I'm looking at all our leftover kit parts. We've got 2 yellow spacers right here in this yellow part packet. I'm not too sure what the total distance on these guys are, but I think if we use these 2 right here, in conjunction with 2 black spacers that are on this parts pack. These 2 little guys right here. And we might be able to get our 8mm distance right there. Once again, we got a 10mm spacer over here, 8mm spacer over here. I like the 8mm spacer a little bit better. So I think we're going to use these parts here to try to get that onto there. As far as this body mount post here, I'm going to cut this tab off right there so that it can't be seen as easily. And then once again, we'll put a little piece of double-sided tape in here before we get this put in place. And then run our 2 screws on either side into either side of here as we throw this around. So really this will be stuck on kind of like this. But further down the line in here, and our 2 screws on either side will get screwed into it on either side. This does have a little bit of a U shape to the bottom of it. But I think if we use a large enough piece of double-sided tape right in the middle down here, it'll take up that gap of that U, and we'll never know it's even there. And after it's stuck on, you won't know it's there either, looking at the back of the truck. So we're going to give this a try and see if this how this works as far as getting this accomplished. Now, a couple other things have changed since yesterday. Once I used to always say that I'm not being sponsored by anybody. I just recently started up a partnership program with A-Man Hobbies and AventLink, A-V-A-N-T-L-I-N-K, AventLink. So this little partnership program deal, from now on in all my videos when I start talking about products or when I talk about products, I'm going to start leaving links down below in the information area to those products at A-Man Hobbies. And if you guys are interested in any of those products that I talk about, and you get on one of those links and jump into A-Man Hobbies and order that product through that link, I'll get a small percentage of the sale deposited into an account for me. And that would be huge. So from now on, we're going to be in this partnership program with AventLink. So once again, I'm going to be leaving links to everything, at least everything that I feel is worthy. And, you know, just as a disclaimer, I got to tell you guys that, you know, I'm getting a percentage off these products if you decide to buy that product. But I'm not going to blow sunshine up your butts about products. I'm not going to tell you anything that the product, not going to lie about the products, put it that way. I'm going to tell you the truth about the products, whether I think it's a good product, whether it's a bad product. If it's a bad product, I'm not going to put the link up there. That's all there is to it. So basically just putting up products that I've had good luck with. And in this case with this truck, I'm going to put up links for some tires and wheels, or wheels more importantly. And I don't necessarily think that they're worth the money, but if you want to build to look like this, then that would be the route to go. But otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the wheels that I'm using. So from now on, once again, not being sponsored, but a partnership program with AventLink and A-Man Hobbies. So once again, leaving links to things. Tamiya Volvo A60H, we're going to have a link to that down below. But as far as this goes, Tamiya does not want you to do this with this truck. They do not want you to put any kind of loads in that bed or put any kind of load on the chassis. This vehicle is meant as more of a toy, just to kind of go out and not necessarily bash around with, but just have a good time with. It's kind of like a lunchbox. There's a brand new lunchbox up there, kit form. Kind of like one of those, except 6-wheel drive. It did come with lunchbox style tires, these big tires right here. Once again, it's not meant to be a tipper truck. And to me, it basically tells you that. You know, they tell you not to use this for this kind of purpose. So, disclaimer for Tamiya, they don't want you to do this with the truck. And if you do something like this with this truck and something breaks, don't blame Tamiya for it, because the truck was never meant for this purpose to begin with. So just putting that out there for you guys and gals. I'm just trying to build a cheap, economical 6-wheel drive dump truck that we can use with these cheaper RC construction equipment items. It's nice to have, you know, in between $1,500 and $12,000 or $14,000 to throw at an RC excavator or an RC dump truck. But I don't have that kind of money. And I'm sure a lot of you other people out there probably don't have that kind of money either. So there's a real need for a cheaper radio-controlled dump truck or tipper truck that's off-road capable and won't break the bank. So I'm trying to build this for less than $600 was my main goal, was to try to build a tipper truck, actual working, functioning tipper truck that can go off-road and not necessarily get stuck in its own shadow like the Wyna and Legendaries over here. These guys get stuck pretty darn easy. So trying to make something that's sort of capable. I mean, we're not asking a lot of it. We don't want to go out and rock crawl up giant hills with a load of dirt in the back. We just want something that we can use on the construction site with these guys and move around without getting stuck, basically. So I think this will fill the gap nicely. Only problem with this truck, once again, is the gearing on it. You just can't get the gearing low enough to really haul a good load of material in it confidently, like with a lot of power. Getting the power low enough is going to be a problem with the vehicle. The tires that I'm running right now are some RC 4-wheel drive, RC 4WD 1.9-inch rock crushers. 1.9 is the wheel diameter, the inner diameter of the wheel, or inner diameter of the tire, which is the outer diameter of this wheel. And they're pretty close to the stock tires that it comes with. They're just a little bit narrower. Pretty much the same outer diameter, but about half the width. So I wanted something a little bit more fitting, once again, for the truck. If we wanted to get a little bit more low-end power out of this vehicle, we could put some smaller tires on it. Now, these are also a 1.9-inch wheel. And this is a set of tires that came off of my brother's Feiyu FY06, 6x6. So we've got 6 of these. And this is slightly smaller. And that would give us a lower gear ratio, ever so slightly, if we put these on here. And if you put a smaller tire on there, even smaller yet, like a 155, something that comes off of a RC 4-wheel drive Trail Finder 2, then we definitely lower our gearing significantly by doing that. Otherwise, we're going to have to rely on the motor to drop our gearing on this. I do have a Spektrum Firma 55 turn brush motor sitting here, which is relatively cost effective. I'm going to leave a link for this one as well, but I wouldn't necessarily say to run out and buy this right the moment, because I'm not too sure if it's going to do the job. We might need an 85 or an 80 turn motor, or even a 550 motor, or even possibly a brushless motor with a real low kV, like 1200 kV or 1400 kV, something relatively torquey in lieu of this. So I'm starting out with this 55 turn motor. I'm not too sure what the stock motor is that comes with this. I want to say it's a 27 turn. But I put a load of material in here, a couple of ceramic fire bricks, and I think it's a 4-inch by 8-inch by 3-inch ceramic brick, maybe a little bit thicker. I put 2 of those in here, which are pretty heavy, and I was able to drive around with it. So on flat ground. So I think it can handle a load of dirt. It should be able to handle a load of dirt. There is some weak points on the chassis on this vehicle. So once again, it's not, going to be guaranteed that something doesn't break. Inside the gears, the main gear set is pretty darn strong. The gears are pretty fat, so I'm pretty confident with that. But the shaft on our outputs here, on our little drive shaft cups or outdrive cups, on the inside it has a really fine spline on the shaft. So that's a weak spot right there. That might possibly strip out. Another weak spot are the bevel gears and little planetary gears or moon gears on the insides of the differential. It's kind of made of a relatively soft metal. So that could possibly strip out as well. So that is one area in here that could be a problem in the future with hauling a load of material in it. Once again, Tamiya does not want you to use this vehicle for this purpose. I am going to leave you a link for this vehicle. But once again, if something breaks on the vehicle because you did this, don't blame Tamiya for it. And a disclaimer is, once again, I like to say a disclaimer before every RC construction video, and that is if whenever it comes to working on an RC vehicle or anything, working on anything and modifying anything, if you decide to modify something, you are taking that responsibility into your own hands. So if you see this video on YouTube or a video similar to this or any other kind of modification video on any other online viewing site, and you see somebody doing something cool to their vehicle and you want to do the same thing, and you mess up somewhere down the line and break something or ruin something or destroy something, that's your fault, not the person's fault who's doing the video. So keep that in mind whenever you decide to modify something. You're taking that responsibility in your own hands. Same thing once again with this truck. If you decide to buy this truck and use it for tipper truck purposes, other than what it was intended for to begin with, and something breaks on it, don't blame me, don't blame Tamiya. You took that chance in your own hands to start the project. So my best suggestion on that is to wait a few months after we do this video and ask me how this truck is holding up and go from there before you decide to pull the trigger on it. So Tamiya Volvo A60H, once again, we'll leave a link for that. Tires, RC 4-wheel drive 1.9 rock crushers. Moving on to the wheels, these are RedCat Gen 7 beadlock wheels, and it is a plastic beadlock with a metal beadlock ring. Now, I'm going to leave a link for these guys, but be forewarned, these are kind of expensive for what they are. It's not the best beadlock wheel, this plastic style, or this style of beadlock with a stylo ring and whole attachment deal. The way it all hooks up is not the best beadlock wheel, especially for being plastic. There's aluminum beadlocks that are very similar to this as well that aren't necessarily the best either. But regardless, if you want the truck to look exactly like this and you want a set of RedCat Gen 7 wheels, I'll leave you a link for those. Once again, relatively expensive. Everything is separate with these things. The wheels are sold in sets of 2. The beadlock rings are sold separately, and the hardware, the screws, are sold separately. And that stuff starts to add up. 4 wheels put together with the beadlock rings and the screws are a little bit more money than some Endura style beadlock wheels that you'd find online. So it starts getting pretty expensive pretty quick. It might be cheaper just to go with some aluminum beadlock wheels versus these guys. But I'll leave the link for them just in case. As far as the beadlock rings go, I painted those myself. That is implement yellow, some spray paint, some farm implement yellow. So colors vary. It doesn't quite match the vehicle. So go with what you want to go with on that. Steering servo. This is a Savox SW0231. I've had a lot of good luck with these servos. It doesn't come yellow. It comes blue. So it's a blue colored servo. But I've had a lot of good luck with these servos throughout the years. It is kind of a noisy. It's a relatively noisy servo. Savox are kind of noisy. But they work great, and they're relatively strong, and I've had good luck with them. This one's a relatively cheap servo. Prices vary. I want to say it's probably less than $40 US currently. It was cheaper a few years ago, but I think right now it's right around $40 US. Good servo, not very strong. I'm not too sure what the specs are on it off the top of my head. I want to say right around 208 inch ounces on 6 volts or 7.4 volts. I could be wrong on that, but if you go to A-Main's website and you look up the servo, it will show you the specs on it, ounce inches of torque that it has. It is waterproof, but I don't think they intend on you submarining it. So once again, keep that in mind. ESC, we're using an old Axial AE5 ESC. As far as things go, I don't think you can get this ESC anymore. A good alternative would be a Hobbywing 1080 ESC. And I'd almost suggest using the Hobbywing versus this and getting the programmer card for the Hobbywing as well. That way you can change up some of the parameters in there if you wanted to. As far as the receiver goes, I'm using a Spektrum SR515 receiver. Reason for that was just to have extra channels. We don't necessarily need a 5-channel receiver for this project, but if I wanted to add lights in the future and other things to it in the future, then it's better to have extra channels. As far as Spektrum goes, I use Spektrum transmitters and receivers for most of my stuff. Had good luck with it throughout the years, never had a problem with it, and it's relatively cost effective, but you guys can use whatever you want. Technically speaking, you really only need a 2-channel receiver for what we're doing. And the winch controller stuff and our motors here, you could power off of a separate battery. You could run that off of anywhere between 6 and 9 volts if you wanted to power this stuff up. So technically speaking, you could have a 9-volt battery sitting underneath our receiver tray down here, or electronic tray, and use that to power this up and just use a 2-channel transmitter. So you don't necessarily need an SR515, but I will leave a link for that as well. Below that, we have an RC 4-wheel drive wireless winch controller. So that is what's controlling our dual servos down here. Now, I'm not too sure if this is rated to handle both of these servos, but it seems to be working at the moment. So that's what we're using. No guarantees on how long that's going to last. I've had a lot of good luck with these wireless RC 4-wheel drive winch controllers and the wired winch controllers as well. I've got a bunch of wired winch controllers that I use for, it's unconventional, but I use it for a LED on-off switch. So essentially a on-off switch on my transmitter, so I can just toggle one of the extra channels on the transmitter and toggle my lights on and off on various vehicles via the transmitter. Usually one of these extra channels right here. Just click on one of those to toggle the lights on and off, and you've got the range of the transmitter, so it's a pretty easy on-off switch that you don't have to carry a separate remote for in your pocket, and it works pretty darn good. I've got one in my NQD jet boat that I plastic dip, so it's somewhat waterproof, which turns the headlights and taillights on, that I've got in my NQD. And I've got them in a lot of crawlers as well, so a whole bunch of crawlers going down the wall. Several of them have those wired winch controllers in there. So wireless winch controller, I have pretty good luck with these guys so far. I've got a bunch of these as well. I kind of like the old style better that comes with this remote. They still make this one. This one powers on whenever you hit the button. Otherwise, it's not powered on. The one that I'm currently using is a newer style wireless remote or winch controller. So two of these, they got two wireless versions, one with this transmitter and the other one with the other transmitter. This one has a separate power switch right here, on-off button. And I don't necessarily care for that. It's just something that you can forget about. But one thing that I do like about this is that it has a longer range than the original. I want to say that this is good for 50 feet, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on it. Price is negligible. It's pretty close. Pretty close on both of these. I want to say it's almost the same. It might be the same. I'm not too sure. It's been a while since I looked at it. So RC four-wheel drive wireless winch controller is what we're using to raise and lower everything up. And once again, no guarantees on whether this is even strong enough to handle two of these motors. I think it should be able to, but who knows? So that is our current setup right now with everything that we have inside the truck. Motor, once again, we've got that stock motor in there. We're going to be putting in this 55 turn. And we might have to change it out from there, so no guarantees on that. As far as the gearing goes, we can't change the gearing. As I said in previous videos, I do have a different pinion gear, a Robinson Racing 17-tooth pinion gear that I was going to attempt to put on here. We have an 18 in the truck right now, which is the smallest one that you can put in. I was going to attempt to put a 17 in here, but I would have to drill new holes for the motor mounts, and you know, not too many people are up for that. So I'm going to see what we can do under relatively stock conditions. So not drilling any holes, extra holes, and just swapping out the motor to see if we can get more power out of it. As far as that pinion gear layout goes and adjustability, basically we have two counter gears in our one pinion gear. So picture these two tires right here as our counter gears in the transmission, or spur gears in the transmission. One of them goes to the back axles and the other one goes to the front axle, and our motor sits right here in between them. So our pinion gear is actually driving both counter gears at the exact same time. It's pushing the drive going to the back and pushing the drive going to the front. So our sizes are very limited. We have an 18 and I want to say a 22 or a 21 or a 23, something like that. And just two set motor positions on the side of the transmission over here. So we've got the 18 position and the other position, or the 23 position, which is slightly lower. You go much smaller and it's like a hot dog in a hallway, and the gear won't make contact. The pinion gear won't make contact with either gear. So once again, I think we could drop it down to a 17, but we'd have to drill new holes in the transmission to move the motor into a different position. But not many people are up for that. So, and we'd only be dropping down one tooth, so it's not going to make that much of a difference. Can't go any lower than that because it's just not going to make contact between the gears. So that's all we can do for it. It'd be nicer if this thing had some lower gearing in it, or it'd be nicer if somebody from Tamiya was watching this video and said, hey, this guy's onto something with making a actual working tipper truck for less than $600 that people can put together, and decided to redesign this truck with some lower gearing. And they would have to redesign the whole darn thing and make these pockets a little bit bigger so they could put some larger gears in it. Ultimately, it comes down to our counter gears, which sit in these two pockets right here, and they are pretty small. That's a pretty small counter gear that they have right here on either side. And that's basically geared for the highest side. The bigger these gears are in outer diameter, the more lower the gearing will be, the more low-end power we'll have with the vehicle. And the smaller they go, the more top speed you have. So it's not necessarily, once again, not necessarily geared for low end. We need counter gears that are about this big, that larger diameter size. If they had something like that as a counter gear, and then an even bigger gear back there for everything else, then we'd be going in the right direction. But right now, once again, it will haul a load of material. Power is going to be, we'll see what our power's like. We're not too sure. But we got it dumping, so hey, we're halfway there, right? We're on to a good thing. And once again, leaving links down below for everything. If you decide to purchase through that link, you'll be helping me out, and I would definitely greatly appreciate that. All right, so let's get back to our video here and our project and what we got going on. We know what we're doing back here. We're trying to move our servos in a little bit closer back here. So once again, going to an 8mm spacer on the back, and we need to try to scavenge some old parts, such as these two yellow spacers on this blister pack, and two of these black spacers that are on this other leftover blister pack, as well as using this body mount in here to tie these two halves together. And we're going to use a pair of side cutters to cut this little body mount piece off of here so it's not being seen. And once we get this kind of sit in place and where it needs to be, we'll use a fat piece of double-sided tape on the back to stick it to the bottom of the tipper truck or the box, and then screw these two in there. And one other thing that we have to worry about is the spacing between here and here. So we're going to have to add some spacers there. So once we get this kind of stuck in place and get our screws ran in, we'll probably have to run this in and out a few times. That way we can figure out what kind of spacing we need here in between these 2 points. So as for what we're going to use down here, I'm not too sure as of yet. We might have to go back to these included plastic sleeves that came with our motors here. Now, as far as these motors go, these were bought from an online bidding war site. I can't say the name of the site, but it's a 4-letter word. It's a very popular online bidding war site. And if you guys do an internet search for Wyna 1550 upgrades, just type in HUINA 1550 upgrades, and it'll throw up these little servos, those worm gear servos. And a bunch of various people have those for sale, various sellers. They go for various number and prices. Prices may vary. So use your best judgment on that. I'm using 2 packs. So, and that's kind of expensive. I want to say in between $25 and $45 for a set of 3. So right around $90 roughly for 2 sets. And it'd be nice if you could just get 2 on their own. If you can find 2 of these on their own and buy them separately, then you need 2 of the shorter ones, and that might be cheaper if you can do it that way. So we're just using 2 cheaper, 2 of the smaller size ones, and we've got the longer ones left over, which is kind of nice too. 2 different lengths, longer ones. We can use those for a separate project if we want to in the future, like this old Tonka bulldozer, and having something to raise that blade up and down, right? So it's nice to have leftovers like that. All right, so we're using 2 kits on that. No links for these guys because I'm not being sponsored by these guys at all. As far as overall lifting power, when I had this on my excavator, I had my excavator on a fishing scale, and that thing was pulling right around 11 pounds. So roughly 11 pounds per servo, say 10 pounds conservatively. Add them together, that's roughly 20 pounds of lifting force. So not too bad. Hopefully once we get this all together, we won't be lifting nearly that much weight. maybe 5 pounds at the most. We probably won't even be lifting that really, because it doesn't really hold that much material in the bed. So it'll probably just be a couple pounds of material back there. We don't want to overload the truck once again. All right, so let's get the getting the stuff mounted up and figured out. Once again, I'm going to back the screw out, get our plate put in place. Dig out our little spacers down here and get those organized and put in place and go from there. So we'll shut off our camera here, get to work, and see what our end result is here momentarily. All right, so here's where we're currently at right now. I did use those 2 little plastic spacers, put them in here. They worked out okay. They were just a little bit shorter than 8 millimeters, probably closer to 6 millimeters on that gap right there. And the screw that I'm using is a 35 millimeter screw. This came with our screw servos, these guys right here. Came with a few of these. And this is a 35 millimeter screw. From the inside of the head to the end of the thread, we're roughly 35 millimeters. That'll work just fine. And we're getting a little bit more thread inside here as well. We're not sticking out through the hole, so it's not going to hit our battery. But we're definitely using all the thread space that's available inside that mount, so that's nice as well. We gained a little bit more thread there. Our other little spacer right here. I cut our nub off, our mount off, stuck it in here, somewhat balanced in between the center, backed both of these screws out, ran both of the screws in so they're making contact, trying to keep this in center with the chassis, or so it looks center with the chassis. Now this is off center. We see our one end over here hangs out a little bit further than it does on the other side. And when you run your screws in, on this side it starts biting right here on the edge. On this side, it kind of goes into an empty pocket for a second, right here where this line is basically, before it starts biting on the inside of here. So keep that in mind when you're putting this in here. I'm trying to keep the center. I basically just had the screws ran into kind of where they need to be. And we're going to lower the bed down right now and apply a piece of double-sided tape to the back edge of this. That way we can get that stuck into place. And then we won't have to worry about this going anywhere. And we can back these screws back out and add whatever spacers we need in here to get that gapping right. So I've got her all plugged in. We're all fired up. Lower our box back down. Just like that. Unplug our battery so we're not messing things up here. And our little back flap, I've already have a piece of double-sided tape sticking on there. I used the measuring device there, measured out what we need, which is 25 millimeters. To stay inside on the flat spot, you need a 25 millimeter long piece. And I'm using some Scotch brand double-sided adhesive, extreme strength mounting tape to do the trick. And we're going to peel that cover off of there and then just flip this up into position and stick it in place. And we shouldn't have to worry about this going anywhere. It doesn't look bad from the back. You can see it's there. But really it's not going to be all that obtrusive. It's really not going to be much of an eyesore, put it that way. Should be okay. Should be okay. The back of this truck's having an eyesore anyways. So it should be alright. Should be alright like that. So I'm going to grab a knife real quick, peel off our adhesive, get that stuck in place, and then we'll move on to our next portion here. Okay, so we've got our double-sided tape attached, holding this in place right now, so we can technically unscrew this and it'll be okay. Now I'm trying to figure out how much spacing we're going to need in between here and our piston, and it looks like about, holding our measuring tape down here, we got 10 millimeters, 11 millimeters, probably roughly 11 millimeters is what we're going to need, 11 or 12 with the spacing right here. Now in our kit we did have a chunk of rubber hose that was in our kit. I can't remember what this was in there for, but I cut this down into a couple smaller pieces, so I cut it in half essentially. So I'm going to shave this down to 11 millimeters, 12 millimeters, probably 12 mil, we'll say. Maybe 11. And use that as a cushion in between those 2 points. So once again, using leftover material from our truck itself, the build, to get this put in place. Now the screws that we're using down here, these are slightly longer, and I have to pull one out and put it on the tape and see what it measures in at. But those are slightly longer. These guys down here are like, what, 35 millimeters on those, and those are pretty long. These might be getting closer to 40. So just pulled out one of those screws back there, checking the length on it, and these guys are really long and different. One has threads on the other side going all the way down the shaft, and this one only has threads going down part of the shaft, which doesn't matter. It's going to work regardless. But this thing is long. That's 45 millimeters. Wow. That is a long screw right there. Other ones are 35. So using two 35 millimeter screws right here and two 45s at the back. Well, I think we got this part pretty much squared away and done with. We don't have to mess with this anymore. Should probably have limiters on here. I don't have any extra limiters laying around. I've got a set of limiters for my Wyna 1550. I have a metal arm conversion kit for that excavator to convert over to metal arms. And it came with limiters for the servos. But I want to keep them for that project. So I don't have any limiters for this one. Once again, we are using this RC 4-wheel drive wireless winch controller for it. I didn't cut any more material out back here. It would probably be beneficial if I took this off and removed just a little bit more material back here. That way it gives us a little bit more cushion when we're pushing this up to dump. That we don't overextend this by pushing this too far. Right there is far enough. Got everything to come out. I mean, as long as you're paying attention to what you're doing and don't overdrive any of these buttons, don't accidentally hit this one too far right now, because it's probably going to push this bed right off. It'd blow that thing right off the hinges. So you gotta be careful about that. Lowering it back down, same thing. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them situation. You don't want to pull it down too far, or else it's gonna pull the screw heads right out of there. Those servos are definitely stronger than the bed itself. So gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to stop on the way back down. She starts making contact, just call it good and take your finger off the trigger. Like that. Alright, so I think we're pretty much good here. That's all together down there. It seems to be holding up pretty good. We got it joined across at the back. With our little mount back there. Double-sided taped up to the top. Doesn't look too bad really back there. You can't really even tell that it's something different that's on there. So I think that's going to work out. Our last little step right now is just going to be wiring this mess up and shortening some of this stuff up and hiding some of these wires and getting them out of the way. And then we're pretty much a done deal on this project. Might have to add more weight to it. I'm dragging this thing around with our battery plugged in. We might have to add a little bit of weight to the front end of this vehicle. Not too sure yet how it's going to handle. We get a full load of dirt in here and start raising it up, it's going to start making these front wheels pretty light. But this truck's pretty heavy, and it's planted to the ground fairly securely. So we might not actually need any extra weight up front. If we do, we could take some lead weight and just use some double-sided tape and put it underneath the receiver tray, or on the front here, or somewhere along underneath this receiver tray and all this electronics, and just load up that whole underside of that tray with lead weight and counterbalance it a little bit if we need to. But right now, I think we're actually going to be okay. We've got a decent amount of weight on the front end as it is, and once we get this thing all the way up in the air, I think that material is going to dump out relatively fast, so I don't think we're going to have a problem with it. Alright, so next step is going to be wiring it up real quick here. I'm going to raise our bed back up and commence the wiring. Once again, we've already got, I was going to switch everything over to JSTs, but we've already got a JST of sorts coming off of these servos. The wires are pretty darn long, so we're going to have a lot of excess wire unless we cut some of that material off of there and solder stuff back on. But I don't think these connectors that are on here, they're not a true JST. And it doesn't really, you have to pay attention to the polarity, because this plug will plug into here no matter what direction you try it in. So make sure to go red to red and black to black if you're going to be using those stock plugs, which I think is what we're going to do. Getting a closer look at our wiring here, we've got on our wireless winch controller, we've got a male JST going into the winch controller, which goes out to this other female connector right here. And ultimately, what we need on our three-way coming off of our servos, we need two female JSTs for our servos to plug into, and then we need one male to go into here. So what I'm basically doing right now is I used that one three-way splitter that we are currently using, and I took a sharp pair of body scissors and cut our connector right off as close to the wires or close to the connector as I possibly could. And I am sacrificing this connector and getting rid of it. The reason I cut it so short like that was so I could slide, have enough room on this wire to slide some shrink wrap down on here to put back over top of my connections after I get done soldering. And then I've got another male JST right here that will cut down a little bit and solder onto this wire right here. So ultimately we'll have two female JSTs on one end and a male JST coming off the other, going into our wireless winch controller over here. And that should shorten up our wires considerably. And we can take whatever's left and just kind of bundle it up underneath our electronics tray here, and hopefully cross our fingers that it doesn't create a magnetic field and interrupt with our signal. As for our wires, I took some shrink wrap and put it over top of our wires, starting right here where the wires come out of the servo, and shrink wrapped it up and overlaid it, and used some double-sided tape down inside this crevice to hold this piece in place. So had the wire out here and laid in a small piece of double-sided tape, and then pushed our wire back in there, so that will kind of keep that wire right there. The one on our driver's side, same thing kind of with our shrink wrap. Using the shrink wrap to cover up the wire, so we're not going to see that red wire or that black wire. I'd rather just keep it uniform. I know there was wires going back here, but If they look like hydraulic hoses, it'd be better. Maybe put a little spring over top of it so it looks like a hydraulic hose. That would be an idea. And basically just taking this one and hiding it behind our servo and running it back up here to underneath our electronics tray, where we'll bundle everything up once again and keep that tied off. So that's basically how we're running the wires right now. Trying to keep it simple and easy for the most part and tidy. So we'll go ahead here and solder our male JST onto our two females over here and get that wrapped up and continue from there. Alrighty, we got her all wired up and she is good to go. Relatively easy job doing our wiring. Once again, we had our two male knockoff JST style connectors coming off of our servos here, but no notches on those connectors to differentiate between the polarities, between positive and negative, so it is possible to plug those in upside down and get your polarity reversed. So when you're hooking those up, you got to make sure that you're going red to red and black to black and keep everything flowing in the right direction. So basically we just had that three-way splitter, and I cut off the one female end off of one end and soldered a male end on instead, and plug that directly into our receiver for the winch controller. And then we got our two female ends going into either servo on either side. Now our leftover wires here for our servos, I basically just kind of pigtailed those up, which is pretty easy to do. It's just a matter of wrapping that wire around a screwdriver, tightly around a screwdriver, and it turns it into a little pigtail and keeps things out of the way. So I put a pigtail on this one, put a pigtail on the other one, ran our wires underneath, like from down here underneath our receiver tray, through this little gap on the front there, and then looped it around to the other side of the receiver tray, back out through here, and over to here. And that kind of keeps everything tucked away and hidden away. So we have our servo wire for our steering servo coming in, our servo wire for our lift servo right here coming in, which is pretty close to each other, relatively hidden, as close as we can get it. And then our wires coming in right over here for this stuff. Once we get our body put in place, you're not going to see a lot of that stuff. Well, we got to get our motor wire positioned right, or our power wire sitting in the right position. That's not going to be sitting there either, but once we get all this stuff put in place and get our chassis, our body put back on, there we go. A lot of that stuff is really kind of tucked away, so you don't notice it too much. Alright, so right now, I'm right in the middle of changing out our motor. We've got our stock motor right here, which I think is a 27 turn. I could be wrong on that. Once again, not too sure what they put in here. They don't label them, so who the heck knows what kind of turn ratio it is. It'd be nice if they put a little label on there to let you know how many turns it is. This one right here, we're getting ready to reinstall this and measuring out our pinion gear and getting that right where it needs to go. And that needs to be 14 millimeters off of this fiber washer here. So from the base of the motor with the fiber washer on it, measured out to the outside edge of this pinion gear, needs to be 14 millimeters. And I just got that all adjusted. And it's going to be hard to show you guys and gals with one hand. That's not exactly what this video is about. We're actually about the modification to the bed, and not to this, but with our fiber biscuit here sitting flat on the motor, which it doesn't want to do because we're on camera, right? But with that sitting flat on the motor down here, and we get everything all lined up, well, you gotta take my word for it, boys and girls. We're at 14 millimeters. So she's all good to go. Hard to do with one hand. And it's just a matter of getting our motor reinstalled back in here. Once again, we are driving 2 counter gears with that one pinion gear. And those are the 2 counter gears we're looking at right there. So once again, we are very limited on our pinion gear size. And we only have 2 positions on our transmission for 2 different pinion gears. And that's a bummer, once again. Alright, so we'll get our motor installed here real quick, and we'll see what the end result is. 2:38 a.m. on Saturday morning, and we've got our motor installed. The truck is basically done. Right now, we are done. It is a done deal. And as far as I know, this is the first Tamiya Volvo A60H in history to have a set of lift servos on it. Maybe somebody else has done it. I'm not too sure. I haven't searched it up to see if anybody's done it, so I mean, Somebody else could have done it. But as far as I know, it's a first. It's definitely a first for me. It's definitely a first for this channel, for putting a set of lift servos on Tamiya Volvo A60H. So we've got our motor changed out. Not too sure what kind of low-end power we're going to get out of this thing. I've got it plugged in. We can do a little bench crawl right here and just see how slow can we go. And that's about as slow as it can get. I haven't messed with the timing on the motor. Just left it right at 0. So I'm not too sure how this is going to be. We'll find out in the daylight. We'll have to take it out here later on today and see what she's capable of. The most important thing is getting our lift servos installed. That was the whole hardest part about this entire build. That was, everything was revolving around these guys and where they were going to go and how it was all going to hook up and how easy or hard that was going to be. And relatively easy. Once again, relatively easy to do. Man, it's so sweet that we've got this working. Having it on remote, making sure that we don't overextend it and don't go too far. We've got a great degree right there for dumping. Should be pretty darn cool. Once again, anybody should be able to really do this. Anybody who's somewhat handy. If you're handy enough to build this truck and put this truck together, you should be handy enough to do this. This is a pretty simple, cut and dry little project here. Once again, we're just using hardware that came with these servos. So screws that came with the servos, the two 45mm screws going through the end down here, and the two 35mm screws that we're using for mounting the servos up. So 35mm here, 35mm on the other side, 45 here, 45 on the other side. We're using those stock spacers that came off of the leftover parts for this vehicle, leftover blister pack parts. So I'm not too sure what the total gap is here. I want to say it's maybe 6 millimeters or 7mm, probably 6 in between here and here. But those two little spacers, the black one and the yellow one on either side. And then back here, once again, using that body mount to join these two halves together. And a piece of double-sided tape on that back half to tie all that together. And some of this rubber tubing that came with the kit as well to cushion that. And I think anybody can pretty much do this once again. It's a pretty easy project. Mounts up pretty easy, pretty cut and dry. And wow, is that ever cool. That's pretty cool. Settles right back down to that factory pinned location, which is absolutely beautiful. Alright, so let's pause our camera. And next time we turn it back on, it'll be a miracle video a couple hours later, and we'll take this baby out in the dirt and see what she can do. Before we go outside here, I want to touch base on one thing. I'm trying to stiffen up the suspension a little bit just so this thing doesn't sag out as much preemptively. I'm assuming it's going to sag down quite a bit. So I'm stiffening up the suspension a little bit. We've got some extra shock collars that came with our kit parts, these yellow shock collars right here. And they are roughly, well, not quite twice as thick, but almost twice as thick as the single shock collars that we had on here previously. So there's two black shock collars right here on this back shock. And previously there's one black shock collar on this one. So one black shock collar on each one of the shocks per kit instructions. Right now I'm taking one black shock collar off of the middle shock, moving it to the back, so we're doubling up the shock collars back here. And then we're taking our one yellow shock collar and putting it on the middle shock. Yellow one, once again, isn't quite, sorry, I'm dropping that thing, isn't quite as thick as these two black ones combined. It's close, but the two black ones combined are just a pinch thicker than this one. So the rear suspension, the very rear, is going to be a little bit stiffer than this, but only by a pinch. So that's what I'm doing right now, taking off a tire, popping off a shock collar, moving it to the back, one of the black ones, doubling up on the back, and then putting these yellow ones on the middle. Alright, this may be difficult to see. Day 3 now. And we are out on a part of a switchback trail network that I recently built that goes around the perimeter of our property. So right now we're almost at the back corner of my property for the people who are channel subscribers, back corner of our property is right down there in that hole, right where that stake's at. It is the far back right corner of our property, which kind of runs along up behind our machine here and over this way. Behind those trees or these trees over here, and then cuts back this way. So I recently built a trail going all the way around our property, around the perimeter, and it's 0.5 miles long, so half a mile long. And I can't tell you how many yards of dirt that I've moved, but this is one of the reasons that I haven't been on, haven't been doing videos lately, is because I've been out here with my brother's John Deere 3043D, the 2023 3043D, and made this entire trail. Moved probably over 1,000 yards of dirt easily. 80 plus hours, maybe 87 hours in total, and about 30, 45 gallons of diesel, maybe a little bit more. So it moves a lot of dirt from point A to point B. This is all a hillside, and building this trail into a hillside. Previous grade went this way, so that's the grade right there, and it matched that hill right there. From that point there, if you draw a straight line across up to that point over here, that's pretty much how the grade was. So a lot of fill going all the way down these edges. And this is where we walk our dogs, essentially. We wanted to make a safe dog walk where we could walk the dogs without going out on the main road. A lot of people drive through here pretty fast. So we wanted a trail that we could walk on, and this is it. It's a half mile long. Alright, well today is Saturday, July 27th. Just to clarify on all that nonsense, we'll go ahead here and get our excavator turned on and plugged in. Just put our battery inside our tipper truck. Got that all turned on, ready to go. Putting the excavator battery in on these 580s is a little bit of a pain in the butt sometimes. I don't like the way the battery fits in here. There's not much room for the battery with the smoke machine that's in here. I do not have the smoker hooked up. Very nice excavator. Weighs a ton. Put a lot of work into that one. We do have videos on that excavator as well, so a lot of work into this excavator. And it's been about a year, maybe 2 years since I've used it. Just waiting for a good solid tipper truck that we could use in between time, right? Now that seems to be a range thing here going on with the transmitter, the way that is jumping downward. Alright, let's key our vehicle on. I'm using a WL Toys 2S LiPo, 3000 milliamp or 3 amp LiPo. Alright, get our truck into position. Once again, we have that 55 turn motor in here, 18 tooth pinion gear. Trying to creep with it. 3-wheel peel. Diff putty might be beneficial. Be loading on a little bit of a hill here. Now we do have the 4-wheel steering option for this truck if we wanted to through Tamiya. Via Tamiya and our instructions, we've got all the stuff to do it. I have the servo to do it. But I didn't think it would look too realistic on this vehicle. Alright, well I think we got it in a good spot for loading perhaps. We are going uphill just a wee bit there. And I'm getting bitten by mosquitoes in between time. Again, excuse my poor abilities here. It's been a while since I've ran this excavator. Using the monster grading bucket, trying to get some bigger loads of dirt. We didn't get a very big load on that one. People are going to be chiming in, oh, you're doing terrible, blah, blah, blah. It's been a long time since I ran this machine, so bear with me. Got a pretty hefty load of dirt there. Now this machine has been highly modified once again, and we can lift the boom up much higher than a normal 1580 excavator. Much higher. Try to load this bucket a little bit heavier on the back edge or on the right edge. We got a little bit heavy on the driver's side there. And I've got a mosquito buzzing in my ear. Let's see, let's get a heavy scoop for the front, maybe. Get this bucket a little heavier on the front side. I want to get a nice, healthy load of dirt in there. I want to kind of push the limits on the truck. A little bit much for the excavator, having that load so far out and trying to turn it at the same time. Would have been much better to keep that close before I turned. But trying to aid up in our, trying to speed things up here a little bit. For the sake of the mosquitoes. I'm not doing that on purpose, I just got my stuff confused. I think we can get one more scoop in there. Try to maximize this thing out a little bit here. We'll try to get an even scoop if we can. Oh, that's a healthy one. You know it's healthy when it's screaming like that. And this is a huge bucket. This grading bucket is just gigantic. It's almost the size of a legendary tipper, or not legendary tipper, but legendary Buckster front end loader bucket, or the Wina loader front end bucket. It's a big, big bucket. Seeing the truck move on that one. I'll go that way. What are we doing here? That up, that down, that over. Alright, I think we got a pretty good load of dirt in there. The truck keyed back on again. I actually powered the truck off while we were doing that and turned off the remote for the wireless winch controller at the same time. Now we've got a load of dirt, so we should have no problem with getting traction at this point in time as far as that open differential issue goes. Now I'm trying to drive it easy, but I think we've got more than enough power to move this load of dirt. And we're going to take it over to a hill and try it. We'll take the camera off the tripod and continue from here on foot. Excuse any shakiness on the camera. I'm driving one-handed here with my transmitter and holding my camera, so not professional, but once again, we are just testing this vehicle to see what its capabilities are. And I can tell you right now, I'd like to see a lower turn motor, I believe. We've got this 55 turn 540 in here. 550 would probably be better. And just get a little bit more torque out of it. As low as we can go on the turn ratio. 80 turn, maybe if we can get an 80 turn 550. I'm not even sure if they make one. But I think that might be the next step towards getting this thing to be a little bit lower. Now this thing will probably move out. I'm slowly standing up, so excuse me. Wide open. We do have our brake on. Now we got this big hill here. That's a pretty big hill. Pretty steep, pretty long. I'm going to drive it down it and see if we can drive back up. That should be a pretty good test for power, right? And braking. And hopefully we don't damage the truck. There's a stick underneath the truck. Not gear noise, it's a stick in the path. Slowing it down a bit. Through some rough terrain. Creeping it. Now this is actually only the second run for this vehicle. My brother bought me this for Christmas a few years ago. Got me this truck, this kit. And then it took me a good year or so before I built it. It's just too much stuff going on. And then another gap here, huge gap between modifying it to do this. Last run was in the snow. I'm trying to creep it here. We got a load of dirt on. Not too sure how much that weighs, but I'm sure it's a good amount. You boys and girls seen how much we put in there. I haven't put any weight on the front end for this vehicle. We did dial up the rear shocks last night before we turned it off. And we put a yellow shock collar on that middle axle. Took the small black one off. Moved the small black one to the very back to double up on the back axles. Going uphill, it's a very long, relatively steep hill, really. Creeping our way along there. Driving over some tree branches. Oh, we got a little three-wheel PL. Momentum is your friend. Oh, we're getting snagged on their middle axle. Right, that little, there's a nub sticking up off the tree here, off this branch. That's where we're hitting. We're getting caught on that nub on the bottom of our chassis. I'm just trying to creep. It's got, I think, more than enough power for just want to juice it and climb on up the hill. So this is with a 55 turn motor and a full load of dirt. Once again, Tamiya does not want you to do this with this truck. This will definitely void any and all warranties that, or any kind of warranties and liabilities towards Tamiya. And once again, anything towards myself. This is a do-it-your-own risk situation. Trying to make a custom RC vehicle such as this, you know, if you mess up somewhere down the line and you break something, it's something on the chassis perhaps, one of the mounting locations, then, you know, that's your own fault. Do it at your own risk. It's working pretty good right now. I'm pretty impressed with it so far. I mean, it's just a first run, granted. We haven't done anything really too major with it. We did climb up a serious hill there, which proves that it's, even though the gearing is terrible, it proves that it can still do it with a load of dirt on the back, which is what I said earlier, or previously in other videos, when I put a couple fire bricks in the back, which was probably 3 times or 4 times the weight of what we got in here right now. And even with the stock motor, it was able to negotiate that. This so far is working out pretty darn good. Beautiful platform to do this with. Worked out easy, pretty easy. I think anybody can do this mod. If you have the ability to build this truck from kit form, then I think you have the ability to do this mod. Alright, well, we got a rain rut right here. Little runoff rut. Not so little, it's pretty healthy. And we got another one up ahead. So we'll back up into one of these ruts here and dump everything off and see how she goes. Curious about the weight transfer is what I'm thinking about. What the weight transfer is going to be like when we unload this material off the back of the vehicle. Getting closer to the edge of this hill, if it went over, that would be tragic. It would probably break something on the plastic. Oh, we were getting stuck. Yep, we're getting stuck. Okay, well, let's start dumping some material and see what happens from there. All right, well, we are poised over the edge of this cliff here. And hopefully we can pull back out of here. I'm going to dump the load just to get this weight off our back. And maybe if we go forward a little bit while we're dumping it, we might get out. I don't know. We'll try. We'll put a little forward torque on it and raise this up. Dumping on an angle, this is not good. Any dump truck driver will tell you that. Oh, that's not good. Alright, well, we unloaded.
And we are still stuck, unfortunately. So maybe we need a winch on this thing as well. This is where the four-wheel steering option might be handy, because we might be able to turn our way out of this. There we go. And everything wasn't quite lined up, so I didn't lower the bed back down right, because it was not wanting to line up with that twist. There we go. We are lined back up nicely in our pins. So not too bad. That is our first successful, somewhat successful dumping situation. We did get into an off camber, and hey, you know, we were able to get back out of it without touching the truck. So that's not bad, really, if you consider that. That's wide open with our 55 turn motor. And that is what this truck is actually meant to do. With stuff like this, it's meant to just bomb around with. This is what Tamiya meant it to do. That's what it was built for. Oh, we're getting close to the edge. Playing with fire. Well, we know it works. Let's go get another load of dirt in here real quick. We'll pause the camera, move, change locations, load it up again, try it out again, and see how she flies. Truck coming in. Beep, beep. Truck sitting up slightly higher at this point in time than the excavator. Mental note on that. Excuse the plastic bag noise. I've got my transmitters sitting in a plastic bag so they're not sitting on the ground. Sloppy there. And the excavator's half. I haven't done any modifying to the swivel gear on this. I don't know if I mentioned it or not. A mosquito bombing me right at the moment. Excuse my erratic behavior here. And the lights on this YNOW 1550, where they have the headlights on the boom, are in the wrong position. They need to be pointing down. I don't know what they were thinking. Engineers who never tested the product. Wow, and just click them like that, you're getting a bite. Try getting some tree roots on that one. Yeah, we got some tree roots. It's a strong excavator. I think we got another full load of dirt there. Kill our excavator, grab our tipper truck, and head on over to the next location. Our truck is keyed back on again. Nice big full load of material on it again. Once again. Not to be redundant on things. Big load of dirt. I know that's a healthy pile. Wet sand. so far we're doing good. We've got 6-wheel drive. We got independent suspension all the way around. We got open differentials all the way around. We could put some diff putty in there and get a little bit more traction. Do we need it? I don't know. Probably not. You're probably wondering, how much heat is the motor putting out? I'm not too sure. Let's give it a touch. We parked it a second ago. So let's get to our destination and give it a touch and see how hot it is. It does have a caution hot sticker on it. Right from the factory. That yellow sticker that we panned across. The load is a little bit uneven. It's leaning a little bit on the passenger side of the truck, the right-hand side. We're going uphill and leaning to the left, and it was leaning to the right, so that tells you a little bit about load placement on that one. It's a little bit off. Once again, I'm going to put links in below for all the items that we used on this truck so far today, or throughout the last few days, including the truck itself. I don't make much money, boys and girls. I don't make really anything for money. I'm sponging off my parents' good graces. So if you feel like helping out the channel and donating to the cause, you know, and you want to do a project like this, purchase through the links. That'll help me out. I'd say make donations, but I'm not one of those people. I tell you to click like and subscribe, but I'm not one of those people either. If you like my channel, then hey, you like my channel, then click like and subscribe. You guys know what you like. You know what you don't like. Don't need me to tell you. Alright, we're moving along. Let's just keep cruising along here with the tipper. It's gonna be a long video. I apologize, but hey, we're testing. Testing purposes. Got another nice little rut right here. Let's back on up and see what she looks like from the backside. I'm sure there's a joke in here somewhere. Some crude humor that everybody enjoys. Alright, so we're a slight off camber, leaning a little bit to the passenger side this time. We'll grab our winch controller and give it a whirl here. Gotta key it back on. Just a straight up dump. Oh, our winch controller doesn't like some of these angles, I don't think. May not be as strong as RC four-wheel drive claims, or maybe we just have too many electronics surrounding that remote. We might have to remove that receiver, or move that receiver to a different location. There we go. Nice successful dump. Beautiful. Pretty much everything out of there. We're not up all the way. That was a pretty good dump. And we are back down. Beautiful, man. I love this little setup. It's working out beautifully so far today. Another burn up all these words here. Great little setup so far. Once again, easy to do, relatively easy to do. I think anybody can do this. If you got the ability to build this truck, I think you've got the ability to pull off this modification. But once again, you are taking that risk in your own hands. If the vehicle breaks because it doesn't like doing this kind of stuff, it's not my fault, it's not Tamiya's fault. Fortunately, it is a Tamiya and you can get parts for it. So that's going to do it, boys and girls. Once again, questions and comments are always welcome, always welcome. Feel free to subscribe if you want to. Feel free to purchase through the links if you want to. Or if you don't want to, it don't matter. But it would certainly help me out. And that's going to do it. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. We'll see you all on the next one. Thanks again. All right, my apologies, boys and girls. My apologies. We never discussed prices on this truck. What did it cost me to get the truck to this point right here? All right, so since the beginning of the video, or since the beginning of this idea, when I first got the idea of trying to turn a Tamiya Volvo A60H into a working tipper truck, my whole goal was to build this truck for less than $600 US. Because in my mind, if I were to go out and buy one of these vehicles ready to run with a transmitter and all ready to rock and roll, limiters on her switches and all that other good nonsense, then I would expect to pay maybe $650 to possibly $700 for a ready to run tipper truck. It was 6-wheel drive, go off-road, and once again, not get stuck in its own shadow. So I'd be expecting to pay
anywhere between $600 and $750. $600 in my mind would be a good price range to pay for a vehicle such as this. Something, once again, not to be redundant, that we could use in conjunction with the Wyna construction equipment, the legendary construction equipment, something that could go off-road. Because as we said in the beginning of the video, the legendary tipper trucks and the Wyna tipper trucks are terrible off-road. They get stuck in their own shadow. As soon as you take them off of any hard pack surface, they're getting stuck. They've got absolutely no suspension, little to zero ground clearance, and hard plastic tires just to start off life. So they say that these tires are rubber, but man, they're like model car tires, like the old school Revel, Monogram, Ertl plastic model cars that you'd build. Like these tires right here. They are like hard plastic. I mean, they say they're rubber, but that is one of the hardest rubbers I've ever seen. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere. But nevertheless, these are terrible tires. Terrible. And I made this one a little bit better by putting some retreads on it, essentially taking the tires and wheels off my WPLB 16 and putting them on this vehicle as like retreads, just basically putting them on over top of the stock tires and gluing them in place, which gave this vehicle a lot more traction. It gave it more ground clearance and made it a little bit more off-road friendly, but still, it still gets stuck in its own shadow. It's still terrible off-road for what it is. It's terrible. Good trucks. You can get this one for less than $150. It is a solid truck if you're working on a solid platform, such as asphalt or hard-packed dirt. Anything else, you're going to get stuck. Same thing with this one. Great truck, very strong, can lift a lot of material, but only good on solid ground. Otherwise, it's just going to get stuck. So we need something like this, something with rubber tires, something with limited suspension, something with 6-wheel drive that can go off-road and not get stuck, and we did a pretty good job of it with this vehicle. So prices vary. My whole goal was to build this truck for less than $600 once again, and I did build this truck for less than $600 because, number one, the truck was given to me as a Christmas present a few years ago by my brother. So I didn't have to pay for the truck, so there's $290 savings right there. The wheels that are on this truck were donated to my channel from another viewer named Matt Yono. What's up, Matt? Very much appreciated, dude, for donating the wheels. I believe Matt donated 8 of these wheels, and I want to say 6 RedCat Interco IROC tires, and I got the tires sitting on my SCX 10.3 early Ford Bronco up there. So those are the tires that came on these wheels. And I thought that these RC 4-wheel drive 1.9 Rock Crusher XTs fit the bill just a little bit better than those Interco IROCs. So I got the wheels for free, and if you were to purchase these wheels separately, that can be very, very costly. It is ridiculously expensive, and we'll look into that. Other things that can cost more money are brand names versus non-brand names. Like this is a Savox Servo, that's a brand name Servo. You're going to pay a little bit more money for that. But if you were to go online to an online bidding war site and get one of those red servos that, hey, say 15 kilogram or 20-some kilogram or whatever kilograms on the side, you can get one of those significantly cheaper, and it will work just as well. So prices vary. Once again, electronic speed controllers, well, you're kind of limited on what you can do with those. I recommend a Hobbywing 1080. I've got one listed down in here with the price on that. I'm using an Axial AE5 ESC, which is from 2016. That's from another vehicle, and I just bounced it from one vehicle over to here to use it for this project. But the Hobbywing 1080 is a much better ESC, and it was actually cheaper than what that one cost back in 2016. Receivers, radios, transmitters. I'm using a Spektrum DX4C transmitter, which is an outdated transmitter. You can't get these anymore. Nowadays, they sell the DX5s and the DX6s, which are a 5-channel and a 6-channel. This is a 4-channel. But I'm running on this radio right here. I've got several different vehicles bound up to one of these radios. So all I had to do was buy a receiver for the truck. So a little bit cheaper for me to get this done. ESC I already had, once again, so I didn't have to pay for that. I had to buy the servo. I had to buy the lift servos. I had to buy paint. And I had to buy tires. So really, I built this truck probably for less than $200. Maybe $250 is about what I paid. Less than $300. For sure. But once again, some of you boys and girls out there, it's going to cost more. All right, so let's discuss prices. Let's take a look at everything. All right, so once again, I'm in a partnership program with A-Man Hobbies and AvantLink. So all my prices here are A-Man Hobbies prices. This is off of their website directly. So prices vary. We're going to leave links down below, once again, in the information area for the majority of this stuff on here. All right, so starting off right now, the Tamiya Volvo A60H or A60Y is what it's called these days. Why? I have no idea, but they changed the designation on that. That is $290 for the truck. Now with that, you get the truck, you get the body, you get the tipper box, you get these tires and wheels, 6 of these, you get a motor that comes along with the truck. I'm not sure what the turn is on that. I want to say it's a 27 turn motor, but no speed controller, no servos, and nothing else. So you need to buy all that other stuff. So $290, you're basically getting the basic kit, and you need to buy your own electronics and yada yada yada. So there we go for $290. Transmitters. I've got a 3-channel transmitter written down here. This is a Spektrum transmitter. I looked on A-Main's website, and they've got several different transmitters from several different brands, and you can go online, once again, and do an internet search and search transmitters and find a bunch of other transmitters that are significantly cheaper than this one, such as Dumbo RC or Fly Sky or Hex Fly or whatever. There's a whole bunch of other brands out there that are cheaper than Spektrum, so you don't have to use Spektrum. You can save money there, but I looked at all the stuff that they had to offer, and this one looked like a pretty solid 3-channel transmitter that you guys and gals could use, and it's relatively cheap at $64.99. So once again, I'm using a 4-channel transmitter. Ultimately, you only need a 2-channel transmitter to get this project done. One for steering, one for your throttle. There's your 2 channels. And if you're using a wireless winch controller such as this, then this has its own receiver, and you can power this off of a separate battery pack. So you can have this running off of a 9 volt or a 7.2 volt or 7.4 volt or whatever you want to do. Less than 12 volts, I want to say. Less than 3S. And power this up separately. So you could run your servos essentially off of a 9 volt battery and have a 2-channel radio if you wanted to. So you don't really need a 3-channel radio. I've got a 5-channel receiver in here with a 4-channel radio, which gives me lots of options for lights and other such things. So right now we've got 1 channel going to my steering, another channel going to the throttle or to the ESC, electronic speed controller, and then a 3rd channel going to the receiver for this thing, which is powering up our receiver as well as powering up our lift servos, and all that's being powered off of the vehicle battery. So there we go. So check out this radio. This is a Spektrum RC. This is a designation number on this, RC SLT3 3-channel transmitter and receiver. So transmitter and receiver. Once again, they've got cheaper models. So they've got another 3-channel one that you can get for less than this. They've got 2 channels that are even less than that. And once again, if you do an internet search for another brand radio, you can find them even less than that. So between our truck and our transmitter, that puts us at $354.99 if you were going to run this setup. Next thing is the ESC. I got a Hobbywing 1080 ESC written down on here. Now, this is one of the most economical and probably best performing ESCs that you can get for the price. There are brushed ESCs that are more money that have less options than what this one has. So Hobbywing 1080 is a great ESC. I highly recommend that. $43.99 on that thing. Pretty good deal. It's got some parameters on there that you can adjust, such as the BEC output, the battery eliminator circuit output. You can put out, adjust it for 6 volts or 7.4 volts or 8.4 volts going to your servo, which is beautiful. That you can crank it up like that. So that's pretty cool. You can do all that stuff through the on-off switch on the ESC, or if you want to make life easier, you can get a Hobbywing program card for $12 and program that ESC so much easier. So $290 for the truck, $64 for the transmitter. Sorry, that puts us at $354.99. We look at our ESC, that's $43.99, which gives us $398.98 is our total there. You add the programming card, that's another $12. That puts you up to $410.98. Once again, I don't have this ESC and I don't have this programming card, so that's not even in my vehicle, but I'm just throwing this stuff out here for you guys and gals as an option. Now moving on to our steering servo, I'm using a Savox SW0231MG, not an MGP, but an MG, and they don't make that anymore. And I want to say that I paid in between $35 and $40 for the servo. It comes in blue. Once again, I painted this yellow. You can barely see the Savox there underneath that yellow paint. And the new one, the MGP, looks exactly like this. It's not yellow, it's blue. But it looks identical to this servo. As far as what the P stands for, I have no idea other than pricey. Because they amped up the price on that. Once again, it was between $35 and $40, and now it's up to $54.99. So that's pretty darn expensive. It's a great servo, no doubt. But you can find better servos probably for less money off of an online bidding war site. So just, throw that out there. And if you were to add this into the mix, that puts us at $465.97, which gives you your truck, it gives you your transmitter, it gives you your ESC, your programming card, and a steering servo. Moving on to our RC 4-wheel drive wireless winch controller, which is this guy right here. Now, when I bought this, I want to say I paid right around $45 for it, and now they lowered the price down to $32.99. That's as of today. It's $32.99. Now, they used to make 2 different winch controllers, wireless winch controllers. I discussed this earlier in the video. This is the old style one right here. It's got some dust on it. They don't make this style anymore, or it's no longer in production. hobby stores still have these. So your local hobby store might have a stockpile of these, or there might be other hobby stores out there that have a stockpile of these, but it's no longer in production. And in my mind, this one was a better transmitter or a better winch controller. It doesn't have a separate on-off switch. When you hit the buttons, that's what keys it on. And when you're not hitting any buttons, everything is off. And that is a great winch controller. This is the new style. It has a much further range. RC four-wheel drive boasts 50-foot range on this guy. It has a separate on-off switch right down here, which is something that can go wrong. Just like a power window on a car. There's only so many ups and downs before it stops working. And when this thing is turned on, it lights up red, which is very hard to see in daylight. It's kind of easy to forget whether it's turned on or turned off. So one more thing to forget about. But it's a great winch controller. I've had a lot of luck with the RC four-wheel drive winch controllers throughout the years. I've got a bunch of RC four-wheel drive winches and winch controllers, and I've never had a problem with them. So $32.99 for the winch controller, pretty good deal. Comes with the winch controller and the receiver. Not a bad deal right there for all that stuff. But once again, you can find a cheaper one. There is different brands that are significantly cheaper, so you can save a little bit more money there. But if you went with the wireless one, the RC four-wheel drive, that's going to put us at $498.96 for that. All right, next step, talking about our motor, I'm using a Spektrum Firma 55-turn brushed 540 motor, which is $28.99. Pretty good deal. They also make this. They make this in several different turns, but the 55-turn and the 80-turn motor are the only two out of that set that you can run on 3S. So this one's 2S and 3S compatible. So is the 80-turn motor, but none of the other Spektrum Firma 540s are. They're all only rated for 2S and not 3S. All right. So as far as the turn ratio goes, I got into a conversation with somebody the other day about turns on a motor, and I've been into RC since I was 4 years old, boys and girls. I mean, that's a long time. I'm 50 years old right now, so that's a long time, 46 years roughly, being into radio-controlled cars and stuff like that. And I was always under the impression that the more turns you had, the less RPMs you had on your motor, and the more low-end torque you had. And the less turns, let's say 11-turn motor, you have more RPM, so it spins much faster. But you don't have as much low-end torque, and you don't have as much takeoff power. You don't have as much takeoff snap, per se. Maybe you do. And maybe they have a lot more takeoff snap. I'm not too sure anymore. After that conversation, my whole motor ideas on all this stuff is pretty much shot. I used to be pretty confident when I was talking about this stuff, but now I'm not so confident anymore. So this vehicle comes, I believe, with a 27-turn motor. Don't quote me on it. It's not marked as to what it is, but it will move a full load of dirt. It'll haul a full load of dirt. So you don't necessarily need a new motor for the vehicle, but I kind of recommend it. I'd almost recommend getting a 550, something with a larger can diameter. Now that would give you more torque. But once again, as far as the turns go, I used to be under the impression that the more turns you had, the more low-end torque you had, and the less RPMs, because you had more windings around the armature. And the lower the turn ratio, the more RPMs you had, and the less torque you had. So once again, I'm at a loss for that. But we have the 55-turn motor in here right now. It works pretty good, as you guys have seen on camera. It does do a pretty good job. I want to say that the 80-turn might do better, but that guy that I was in the discussion with might have another idea about that. So excuse me for wiggling the camera around here. So yeah, I'm not too sure about that motor. Once again, I'm using a 55-turn. It works okay. You can get the 80-turn as well if you wanted to, or you can step it up to a 550. The highest turn 550 I've ever seen, I think, is right around 40 turns. So that would probably be a better motor than this 55-turn 540, in my mind. Maybe. If you get like a 40-turn 550. Or move on to a brushless motor. Same thing with the brushless motors. I used to think the lower the kV number, the more low-end torque and snap you would have. And the higher the kV number, the more RPMs you would have, the more revolutions per minute. But once again, after having that discussion with that other guy, I might be wrong on that stuff. So, could be wrong. But Hobbywing makes a motor ESC combination with a brushless 540 that puts out 1200 kV. I want to say it's either 1200 kV or 1400 kV. Don't quote me on price, but I want to say it's right around $65 US. And it's the motor and the ESC are all in one. And they say it's relatively weather resistant, so that could save you some money once again for the ESC. Relatively weather resistant, and would probably have significantly more power than what we were getting with this 55-turn 540. That's for sure. But if you buy one and it breaks on you or can't handle the load, please don't blame me, because I'm just spitballing this stuff right now and trying to hypothetically come up with solutions for stuff. So if it breaks on you, don't blame me. Same thing with the Tamiya Volvo. Once again, Tamiya does not want you to do this with this truck. This is meant to be kind of a basher play truck, like a Tamiya lunchbox. It's meant to go off-road and have a lot of fun with, basically. We're using it for a tipper truck. Tamiya does not want you to do that. But in my mind, what we're using the truck for is really not putting on any more wear and tear than what you would if you were using this thing as a basher slash play truck. If you're using it as a basher slash play truck, you're going into terrain wide open most of the time, and that's very hard on your drivetrain, bouncing through things at speed. That's kind of hard on things. What we're doing with the truck, hauling a load of dirt at slow speed, just going from point A to point B and dumping the material back out, really isn't all that hard on the vehicle. I think the hardest part on the vehicle for all that nonsense is the motor itself. Is probably taking the brunt of the load for all that stuff. And this one did not heat up at all, this 55 turn motor. I ran it up and down that hill a few times with a load of dirt on it, that big steep hill, and it wasn't getting warm at all. So you could touch it with your hand and it was cool to the touch. So it handled it pretty darn good in all reality. All right, so there we go. Spektrum Firma 55 turn motor, brush motor. If you want to go with that and you add that into the price, $28.99, that puts you at $527.99. Next thing up the bat here is a bearing kit. I'm using a Fast Eddie's bearing kit in this vehicle just because it's good sense. There is a ton of bushings on this thing. This thing is nothing but gears from front to back. This whole truck is just nothing but gears through this entire transmission. And every one of those gears basically has 2 bearings on it. So that's a lot of bearings. And if you were to use bushings, that's a lot of things that could possibly wear out relatively early in the truck's life. And if you want to get into that gearbox to replace all those bushings with bearings at some point in time, you have to take the entire truck apart in order to split that gearbox, which you got to take everything off of it. That gearbox is the very first thing that you put together when you're building this truck. So when you need to go back in there, that's basically the last thing you get to when it comes to taking it apart. So you got to strip the whole truck down in order to do it. So if you want to put bearings in the truck, you're better off doing it on day one. And I used a Fast Eddie's sealed bearing kit and then put lots of grease in there along the way just to make sure that was going to last a long time. So that bearing kit, I do not recommend going to A-Main Hobbies for this, because A-Main only has one bearing kit listed for all the G601 chassis. G601 is the chassis for this vehicle. And that covers this guy right here. It covers that big monster school bus. It covers that other truck, maybe the Bullhead, and I think the Dynahead. Or maybe it's the Kong head and the Dynahead that all have those basic chassis. Now, the Dynahead is one difference out of those two is the Dynahead, and that's what this bearing kit is for right here. G601TR, that's for the Dynahead. And the Dynahead has portal axle units on each one of the wheels. So that means more bearings for that one. And that's the only bearing kit that they have listed is for the Dynahead, and that is $84.99. That's expensive, $84.99. I got my bearing kit from Fast Eddie's directly. So go online, do an internet search for Fast Eddie's wheel bearings, jump on their website, type in Tamiya A60H or A60Y bearing kit, and it should pull them up. And these were $46.99. So significantly less bearings with the standard A60H or the G601 versus the Dynahead having the portals. So basically this bearing kit right here would work good for this truck, the school bus, and the Kong head. And the Dynahead is a little bit more money because it has portal axle units on it. So there we go. That puts us at $574.98 with the bearing kit. Next thing is the tires. RC 4-wheel drive 1.9 Rock Crusher XT tires. These are $15.99 for a set of 2. That's actually a really, really good deal, boys and girls. $15.99 for a set of tires. 1.9 tires vary on price anywhere from $20 to $35 or even $40 for a set of 2. So $15.99 is a pretty good deal from a reputable company such as RC 4-wheel drive. Yes, you could probably find 6 other tires that are similar to this from a no-name brand online for maybe $15.99. You might be able to get all 6 for $15.99. But you don't know what you're getting because you're buying from a brand that you don't know. So the tires might be out around. They might have big knobs or nubs sticking up on different sides. You don't know what you're getting. So RC 4-wheel drive, you're buying from a reputable brand, and $15.99 is a pretty good deal. But you really don't even have to run these. If you wanted to save some money, you can run the stock tires and wheels that come with this kit. These would be just fine. You can run these. There's nothing wrong with these tires. They would be a great fit for this vehicle if you wanted to run them on here. I just think that the RC 4-wheel drive Rock Crushers look a little bit more to the part. I think it fits the truck a little bit better than these big guys right here. But hey, if you want to save some money, you can run these or run whatever tires you have laying around. So you can save some money there. Otherwise, if we go $15.99 here times 3, because we need 3 sets, that would put you at $47.97, which isn't bad. And it brings you up to $622.95. So we just passed the $600 mark right there with the tires. Once again, if you use the other tires, you can save a little bit of money. Going on to our screw servos, we're using 2 kits for the Wyna 1550. So once again, do an internet search, type in HUINA 1550 upgrades, and it'll throw up these servos. And there should be 3 of them, 3 different sizes. You got the small one, one that's relatively long, and one that's just a pinch longer. So we're using 2 of the small ones on here. We need 2 of those kits in order to get the job done. And prices vary. When you go to onto one of those online bidding war sites, I want to say they're anywhere between $25 and $45 for one set. So, you know, use your own judgment. Shop around, see which ones you think are the best for the price. I think they're pretty much all the same, boys and girls. Like these guys, they look identical to the ones that I have on my 1550 over there. And I bought those years ago compared to these guys right over here, which I bought a little bit more recently. So $25 to $45. Let's just say 90. We'll go on the high side. We'll say 90 bucks. 45 times 2 is 90. And that would put us at, what are we sitting at here with our servos right there? That puts us at $712.95. Once again, using all these items, tires and all that other nonsense, puts us at $712.95. And we haven't discussed these wheels as of yet. All right, so let's move on to our RedCat Gen 7 wheels. Once again, these are donated to my channel from a viewer, Matt Yono. What's up, Matt? Very much appreciated. Once again, I can't thank you enough for these wheels, bro. So if you were to went out and buy these, they could get very, very expensive. Number one, they don't make this wheel anymore, this style. This is off of Gen 7. So you might have to go to RedCat's website directly if you want to get this wheel. But as far as A-Main goes, they do not have this wheel. The closest thing that they have to this is the Gen 8 wheel in black, which is one of these guys right here. It looks like this, but in black. So you can get one of these days, but you can't get those anymore unless you go to RedCat's website, and you might be able to find it. Another thing that you need is the hardware and the rings, the beadlock rings, these guys right here. And that stuff starts to add up. So let's discuss all this nonsense. The wheels, according to A-Main's website, for the RedCat Gen 8 1.9 plastic beadlock wheel, those are $5.99 for a set of 2. That's not too bad. You go times 3, so you get 6 wheels. That's $17.97. That's not terrible for 6 plastic wheels. 6 of these in black for 17 bucks or 18 bucks. That's a pretty good deal. Now, if we go on to our beadlock rings right here, we're going to need those times 3. So we'll need 3 sets of those. Those are $17.99, and that's 4 in a pack. That's basically enough to do 2 wheels. So you need to have that times 3, which is $53.92. And if you want to add it into your tires or your wheels, that puts you at $71.64 for just the wheels and the beadlock rings. Now we still need the hardware, all our screws right here. We got 6 screws on the front, 6 screws on the back. That's 12 screws total. Times 6 is 72. So we need 72 screws. Now the problem with these screws is that they're sold in packs of 10 and not packs of 12. Wah, wah, wah. That's kind of mean. So you need to buy 8 of these. You're going to have to get 80 screws in order to get the job done. If you buy 7, it's going to give you 72 or 70 screws, and you're going to be 2 screws short. So $5.99 times 8 is $47.92. You add that into our other price over here, and the total is $119.98. Basically $120 for 6 plastic beadlock wheels. That's really, really expensive. You can buy some aluminum beadlock wheels that are very similar, the same style, in aluminum. Much cheaper. You can get like 4 of these for like 20 bucks. These wheels right here from one of those online bidding war sites. So I'd highly recommend just going with some of these and finding some with a beadlock ring that wasn't red. Maybe something with a silver beadlock ring, and just paint it yellow or whatever you want to do to match your vehicle. Would probably be a better way to go. So I would recommend going to an online bidding war site and try to find some aluminum beadlock wheels such as this, which you can get much cheaper, significantly cheaper than what you can for a set of these RedCat wheels. That is for darn sure. But if you wanted to use the RedCat wheels, you wanted your truck to look exactly like this, and you want to build it, and you're starting from scratch with absolutely nothing, then your grand total is going to be $832.81 to get the truck to look like this, starting with absolutely nothing. So there we go. Prices vary, boys and girls. I just wanted to cover all that nonsense about the prices and stuff because it's so important. Once again, I was talking at the beginning of the video that I wanted to build this truck for less than $600, and I personally did. I got it built for less than $300, but I didn't have to pay for the truck, and I had some other equipment beforehand. And once again, it's going to be the same thing for some of you other guys and gals out there. Is that you'll probably have some stuff, maybe another radio laying around with the receiver, maybe some ESCs laying around, maybe different tires laying around, maybe servos laying around, but you'll be able to save money here and there throughout the build. So some of you guys and gals might be able to build it for less than $600, less than $500, less than $400. Other people out there who are starting off with absolutely nothing and you need to get the truck done, then you're going to be looking a little bit more expensive. If you stay away from the aftermarket tires and aftermarket wheels, then you can probably get the truck built for right around $574, less than $600, if you stay away from different tires and wheels. So there we go, boys and girls. Here's a little rundown on everything. There's another final look at our truck. We do have a driver sitting in there at this point in time to match all our other drivers here. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. Questions and comments are always welcome. As always, once again, if you feel interested in buying, starting a project like this, feel free to purchase through the links down below in the information area. Once again, in a partnership program with Avant Link and A-Main Hobbies, and that would greatly help me out. I'll get a very small percentage of that sale. I don't make any money, boys and girls, not to be redundant about that, but I really don't make any money. So if you guys and gals want to help me out, purchasing through the links would definitely help me out. All right, so that's going to do it, boys and girls. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video, and we will see you all on the next one.